Hello everybody. Today we are going to be learning how to play arpeggios in the first position using chords with some open strings. And those of you who are interested in learning fingerstyle guitar, I think you'll find that the language of the arpeggio is very basic, but also from that language you can elaborate and create lots of interesting music. And simply put, the arpeggio or an arpeggio is simply playing the individual notes of a chord as opposed to playing the chord at the same time. So this would be just kind of simple ringing through arpeggios of a C chord. There's different ways you can play them, of course, really infinite. So for example, you could play the scale notes of a C major and then play the chord if you wanted. Etc., etc. There's lots of ways to do it, but we're going to keep things simple today with just some first position chords. And the chords really don't matter actually, because the chords are going to be pressed down, of course, on my left hand, but the action with the arpeggio is really on the right hand. So I'll just stick with the C chord for now, and then maybe we'll do a few other chords. But with the C chord, as I have my fingers ready to go on my left hand, for the right hand, that's where, again, the arpeggio will take place. And so what matters really most of all is knowing which fingers will pluck which strings. And if you're just starting out, it might be a good idea, I think, just to kind of rest your fingers on the strings ready to go. The rule of thumb, no pun intended, that I use, that was taught to me, and that I've mentioned in an earlier lesson, is that generally speaking, your thumb should always be responsible for plucking the bass notes. That is the 6th string, the 5th string, and the 4th string. After that, your first finger should be responsible for plucking the notes on the 3rd string. Your second finger should be responsible for plucking the notes on the 2nd string. And lastly, your 3rd finger, or your ring finger, should be responsible for plucking the notes on the 1st string, the E string. Now, that can be kind of shifted up and down a little bit if you have a lot of bass notes, for example, in a chord. You're going to have to start, moving your fingers up, and by up I don't mean pitch, but I mean physically up towards your face, and therefore I'm just kind of breaking that rule. But that's the basic rule. If that rule is not something that works for you, then just I would say when you get ready to play a chord, just get your fingers ready. So let's use the C chord as an example. So the C chord is here on my left hand, and on my right hand I have the thumb playing the C on the 5th string. And see, I already broke the rule because I have my first finger, the index finger, playing the 4th string, it's the E, and I have the 3rd finger playing the 3rd string, that's the open G, and then lastly I have my ring finger, my 3rd finger, that's the second finger for the G, my 3rd finger on the B playing the C. Okay, so some of you might be saying, but what about the high E? Well, we can talk about the pinky perhaps in a later lesson. You can include it in there if you want, but it's still a C chord without that. Okay, so the arpeggio would be, at the most simple form, just playing those notes however you want. You can maybe use a metronome. You could perhaps just kind of use your own kind of sense of what you want the music to sound like. You can have them ring through like I'm doing right now. But the point is that those same fingers are always playing those particular notes, and if it helps you to look at your right hand while you do it, and if you're just starting out, go slow, that's great. And come up with your own patterns. Perhaps try just simple a bunch of times, and then do that, then back the other way. Again, it really doesn't matter. Whatever feels comfortable for you and whatever makes sense for you as you learn the arpeggio. So that is the basic arpeggio, but from that basic C chord arpeggio, you can do lots of things, such as kind of shuffle the notes back and forth. You don't have to go in order. You don't even have to start with C for that matter. We could start with our second finger on the G, and then I'm just thinking out loud, and then to the second string, to the fourth, repeat it again 3 times. And on the C, do that again. Notice how it has a different flavor. And for that matter, you don't have to let them ring through. You can just kind of pluck and mute. And if you're going to mute them, of course, you're going to be using your finger again to do so. Try that again. Not that good, but you get the idea. I actually like to, they're not really arpeggios. I'm not sure what you'd call them. But I like to play multiple strings at once, maybe 2 at a time. I do this a lot. Okay, so I'll give you another chord as an example. Perhaps we should do the G chord. And the G chord has a lot of bass strings in it, in this form at least. So here's the full G. I'm going to strum it. And let's play it. There's lots of ways we can arpeggiate it, but let's play it at the low end on the G here. 3rd string, 3rd fret on the 6th string. That's our G, that's the root. And then, again, we line up our fingers, breaking that rule from before, because notice how in this instance, my index finger and my middle finger are hitting bass notes. They have to, or actually they don't have to. You can have your thumb jump. There's nothing wrong with that either, for that matter. Jump from one string to the other of those bass strings, and then have your index finger hit the G, open G. Have your middle finger hit the open E, open B, 2nd string, and then you can have your 3rd finger hit the 1st string, the G again. So I personally don't like that because it kind of cuts down on speed a little bit, but whatever works for you. In fact, it might be a good way to kind of do it this way in the beginning, because you're telling yourself, right, my thumb always hits the bass strings for a while, and then maybe break that rule a few months, and then start moving your finger back up. You know, there's 6 strings and 5 fingers, and we're kind of taught not to use the pinky. I do use my pinky, and I would encourage you to do that. It depends on, I guess, how big your pinky is. I grew out my nail a lot, and that could be something to think about, because it gives you another finger to use. I think I mentioned this before, but when I first started taking lessons, I was told not to ever use it, or just it was not really part of the conversation, which I felt was unsatisfying, because it's there, and okay, it's shorter than the other fingers, so it might not have the same reach, but you can grow out your nail and do lots of cool things with it. In fact, unrelated, I like to strum sometimes with my pinky, because the nail is so, in my case, so big, so it produces a nice sound. Okay, so that's the basic idea with arpeggios. You want to, again, get your fingers ready on the right side, your right hand fingers. In fact, maybe even plant them before you start playing them if you're new, and do it a lot, so you kind of get that muscle memory, and you don't necessarily down the road have to look at your right hand. But as you start, it's nothing wrong at all with looking at your right hand. And you won't have to look at your left hand, because you're not switching chords. Although, once you get them down a bit and you want to start switching chords, that could be an interesting exercise, because now you're creating maybe the music that you want. Throw in a minor A, throw in a minor, an E minor, and you get that kind of nice kind of rolling sound. Okay, so those are the very, very basics of arpeggios. And they are quite useful because, of course, they can be used with left-hand techniques like hammer-ons and pull-offs and slurs and bends and all the rest of it. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.